indefinite leave to remain, or ILR. The first petition, started by Lawrence Banshill, who sits in the gallery, calls on the government to protect legal migrants and scrap the proposed 10-year settlement route. The second, from Palasi Weerasangi, calls for keeping the 5-year route to ILR, but to restrict access to benefits to protect the public purse. My mother once had ILR. She came from the Philippines in the 1970s on a work visa. She worked in London hospitals, got ILR, and then British citizenship. She built a life here and cared for generations of patients right to the end of their lives. One of those patients was a former member of the House of Lords and senior judge, and I remember her recounting her many conversations with him about his distinguished career, as well as about my own legal studies and aspirations, which he showed a keen interest in. She attended... I will.
I thank my friend for leading on this very important debate. Many of my Slough constituents, especially healthcare workers, have signed these petitions about the indefinite leave to remain, and in particular how many of them feel that the goalposts are being moved and this will have a huge detrimental impact on their lives. Does my honourable friend agree that there should be no retrospective implementation of this legislation, because that would be truly unfair on them and on the rest of us?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I do agree with him, and that's exactly the analogy that I was going to use in due course. But as I said, so in relation to this example I was just recounting, that my mother attended this guy's funeral, which she did for many, many patients. And it shows really that this isn't just work, it's a real service to the public, and really in times of critical times in people's lives when they're very, very vulnerable, that is an example of a profession which is extremely important. It's hard work, but it's vital work. But the sector has been plagued by labour shortages for many, many years. And after Brexit shut off the recruitment pipeline from the EU for social care workers, and with a pre-existing recruitment crisis in that sector, a large vacancy problem had emerged by 2021, which led to the Home Office putting social care on the shortage occupation list. And those who came, I will in a second, those who came here to work moved their entire lives here, brought their families here as they were entitled to do. And they did so when the rules said that after 5 years they could apply for settlement in the UK. That was the deal. I'll take...
I'm grateful to the Honourable Deputy for making a compelling case here. The position is particularly acute in island communities, where we need to bring people in to be part of our community. Their role is welcomed, and we can't just ship workers in from another town or village 10, 15, 20 miles down the road. This extended period of ILR will make it less likely that people will want to settle in communities like mine, because they will not want that extended period of uncertainty in their own lives.
Is his constituents in exactly the sort of similar position to my constituency of Folkestone Hyde, where there's been a long-term recruitment and retention crisis as a coastal area? You can only go one way, and there are massive, massive problems, which I think will be, I agree with him, worsened by this proposal. I will.
Just so I don't interrupt his flow, he's making a fantastic speech, and I thank him for bringing this debate. According to the Royal College of Nursing, 60% of internationally educated staff without ILR, so it's very likely that the extending this qualifying period will affect their decision to remain in the UK, and that equates to 46,000 nursing staff at risk of leaving the UK. Does he agree that this policy would worsen the retention crisis? And also, does he agree that the government ought to produce an NHS-specific impact assessment on this policy?
I thank my honourable friend for intervention. I completely agree with her, and will go on to make those very points. And so that was a deal, but the government is now considering doubling the wait for settlement from 5 to 10 years and up to 15 years in the case of care workers. And one of the most contentious elements of the consultation is that that will apply to people who are already here. And so, Edward, my position is that I fundamentally oppose that rule change. Migrants entered this country on a contract. The deal was simple. Come to work in the sectors where we need you to work, obey the law, pay your taxes, and you can stay. And changing the terms of that contract after people have spent years building a life here is not just bad policy, it's a breach of trust. It makes Britain look unpredictable, and a country like a country that does not keep its word. You cannot talk about earning settlement. I will in a second. You cannot talk about earning settlements if you keep moving the goalposts after the game has started. In my view, retrospectivity is un-British and undermines our sense of fair play. It should be abandoned, and that is the position of the two petitioners who sit in the public gallery, and I wholeheartedly agree with them. I will give way.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I'm sure his mother is very proud of him today in the House. My constituents have written to me they're a same-sex couple with a child who fled from Russia because of fear of persecution. They are working here, they're paying tax, and their child is in a local school, fully integrated into the community. They've written to me to say they are 10 months away from gaining ILR, and they really feel changing the rules retrospectively does not honour the commitments that were made to them when they were granted refugee status. So does my honourable friend agree with me that this would be very shameful for our country to turn back on what was promised to my constituents when they first arrived here?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention. I completely agree with her. It is the question of moving the goalposts that I think really is problematic for most of the colleagues who are in this room today, and I completely agree with what she says. I'll take an intervention.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does he agree, as a fellow lawyer, that it is rather unusual to bring into effect legislation which is retrospective? There have been previous cases where legislation has been made retrospective, but that has been to punish crime. These are ordinary, decent people that we are talking about who've come into this country not only to better their own lives, but our lives as well, and the rest of the community. So does he agree that it is absolutely wrong to have the law applied retrospectively, and it just puts the legal system to a bit of a shame? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I completely agree with him, and the common law sets its face against retrospectivity, and that is a principle which should preclude this change. I want to also address a number of other elements of the consultation. The government suggests a system of credits to shorten the 10-year wait for things like social contribution. And now, on the face of it, that sounds reasonable, but I think the proposed definition of social contribution is dangerously narrow. It includes things like the police and the NHS, but it inexplicably, in my view, excludes people like care workers in the private sector. And it seems to me, why are we proposing a bureaucratic minefield of volunteering credits, which could be very, very difficult to verify, while ignoring the immense social value that care workers give during a 12-hour shift looking after our elderly? In my view, their job is their contribution, and that should be the credit. I'm also concerned about... I will.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. He's making a really important case. In my constituency of Waveney Valley, the care sector is one of the largest employers, and local providers tell me that the proposed changes could drive 10 to 20% of people out of the care sector. So does he agree that before proceeding with these changes, the government must do a proper impact assessment on the care sector, and also address the fact that if the NHS has different criteria for allowing settlement routes, that could punish the care sector, which is particularly struggling already?
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. These are, in fact, exactly the points made by the first petitioner who sits in the public gallery, who does indeed work in the care sector. I'm also concerned about the proposal to place lower earners, including most care workers, on the 15-year route to settlement. We've heard the points made by others about the problems in recruitment. It will certainly make the position worse. And during that limbo, you cannot progress. As one of the petitioners, Mr Weerasinghe, told me, he must complete the entire qualifying period on the same job code, meaning he has to stay essentially in the same job. So he can't progress, and it means that he can't move beyond the job that he originally came here for. And at the end of the 10 years, he ultimately pays less tax, and that isn't in the interest of the public, and it makes no sense. If we tell a care worker they must wait 15 years for security, while Australia offers it in 3, Canada in 5, they will simply vote with their feet. We risk becoming a training ground for our economic competitors, recruiting talent, training them up, and then watching them leave for jurisdictions that offer them a stable future. I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and for leading on this very important debate, and for frightening people with my very loud voice. I'm sorry. but I wanted to be heard. So does my honourable friend agree with me that this proposal is both unfair and dehumanising, and what this government needs to do is to halt it immediately? Over 1,000 of my Liverpool Riverside constituents signed this petition. I've met some of the care workers in my constituency and here in Parliament, and they are very frightened for their livelihoods and their futures. Do you agree with me? It needs to be halted.
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention. I do agree with her. It's the the fear of people who are already in the system, who don't have the stability, who don't know what's going to happen, who've made that huge investment and fear for the future, who are at stake. I want to address very, very briefly...
I see nobody intervening. There's so many people trying to get in this debate.
Yes, I'll press on very quickly to the end. I just want to address very quickly the public funds issue and integration. Mr Weerasinghe's petition does advocate for restricting benefits for new ILR holders, but in my view this is a political choice, not an economic inevitability. If we raise the core care worker pay by around £4,000 a year, that is a step towards the sector-wide fair pay agreement that Unison is calling for, and then we could bring a single care worker up to the level where they are a net contributor in tax, reducing churn in the sector and finally rewarding people who hold our health and care system together. And I want to say something very, very briefly about the no recourse to public funds system. Under that system, we know that many migrant families are just one crisis away from disaster, and depriving migrant families of benefits to which they would otherwise be entitled contradicts the government's own child poverty strategy. If we want sound public finances, we need integration. Integrated families are stable, they're renters, they're homeowners, they're taxpayers. You do not build that stability by keeping people on the edge of destitution for over a decade. So in conclusion, I do not deny the government's consultation is based on a potentially legitimate aim of ensuring that the path to settlement for non-nationals is fair and serves the public interest. But on the key consultation points, I would say in summary, first, abandon retrospectivity, integrate those who are already here, honour the contract. Second, regarding the care sector, I understand the fear of leakage, so-called, that care workers get ILR after 5 years and then immediately quit for better pay in other sectors. But a 15-year trap is not the answer. It is a charter for exploitation and slavery, modern-day slavery. Instead, let's look at time-limited sector-specific conditions, possibly requiring people to remain in a sector for a period of time. Third, recognise care work as a valid social contribution. And fourth, do not overcomplicate the penalty system. We already have robust, good character rules. We just need to apply the rules we already have. I urge the Minister to listen to the voices we've heard in the petition and today in this debate. Drop the retrospective measures, rethink the 15-year wait. Let us be a country that has sustainable economic migration rules, but remain a country that always, always honours its debts, not just its financial ones, but its moral ones too.
Order. The question is that this House has considered the E-petition 727372 and 746363 relating to indefinite leave to remain. Now, we can see there's so many people trying to get in, and we're going to try and get you all in, all right? But I've got to impose an immediate 3-minute time limit. And I've got to tell you that every time there's an intervention, that means that somebody at the back of the queue may not get in at all. So do bear that in mind. But we'll try and get everybody in, and we'll start with Cameron Thomas.
Thanks, Joe Hood. It's an honour to serve under your chairship. Let me begin by thanking my constituent, Palasi, whose petition has led in part to this important debate. I believe that when you make a deal with somebody, you honour it. You are honour-bound to keep it. Ayana does not understand politics, nor should she have to. She began her education at nursery here in the UK, where she began to learn how to interact and play with others. And she made her first friends here in that nursery. Almost 4 years since her father made a deal with the UK to uplift his family and come here to work, Ayana now has many friends at school, where English is one of her strongest subjects. Everything that Ayana has come to learn about the world, she has learned here in the UK. She has no meaningful connection anywhere else. Like any other child, she imagines growing up together with her friends, completing her GCSEs. When she grows up, she wants to be a dancer or a lawyer, as is the nature of childhood. Almost 5 years ago, her father made a deal with the UK. The 5-year route to indefinite leave to remain gave him enough certainty to justify bringing his family here, to plan their futures and guarantee stability in Ayana's formative years. I'm glad that she is yet unburdened by the instability her father now feels. The changes to indefinite leave to remain, as announced by the Home Secretary in November 2025, have caused unnecessary stress to many who have already lived here for several years, who have paid visa fees, the immigration health surcharge, income tax and national insurance. On the 2nd of September 2025, I invited the government to demonstrate true leadership over the issue of immigration, rather than to follow the Conservative Party and Reform UK into the abyss. If the government does have the moral courage to navigate this sensitive issue with compassion, then it must honour the deal it made with such families before the goalposts were moved. Whatever else changes, will the government honour the timeline to indefinite leave to remain, as was promised to those who are already here?
Thank you, Sir Edward. I think there's few people who are opposed to a robust and fair immigration system, but sadly these plans are not that. They'd rip up the promise on which people built their lives. For workers who are asked to come here to fill skills gaps in our public services and industries, the route to settlement would double from 5 years to 10. Lower paid public service workers could be forced to wait 15 years, longer than the new standard, while those earning six-figure salaries are offered a fast track of 3. Contribution measured by wages rather than care given, life saved and children taught. And worse still, these changes would apply retrospectively. I want everybody to have time to speak. Worse still, these changes would apply retrospectively. Nurses, social care staff and council workers who came here under one set of rules would suddenly find the goalposts moved, or worse, deported due to harsher income thresholds, with their public sector employers unable to meet the increased salary requirements and their colleagues left behind stressed and overworked. Even after gaining indefinite leave to remain, people would face no recourse to public funds, settled in name but excluded in reality. For women fleeing domestic abuse, for disabled people, for LGBT communities, the impact will be cruel and profound. And these issues also reach beyond skilled worker routes. In the asylum system, charities and clinicians warn that prolonged insecurity deepens trauma and drives people into destitution. Earlier access to work, settlement and citizenship improves outcomes for individuals and for the communities they join. A humane asylum system with safe routes and timely decisions is not an act of charity, it's an investment in social cohesion. Another community unfairly affected are the BNO visa holders from Hong Kong. For them, the 5-year path to settlement must be protected and made permanent. Retrospective rule changes, excessive salary thresholds or language barriers would simply betray the commitment that this country made to people seeking safety and freedom. Children born here should have automatic and secure status, not years of uncertainty. So I'd urge the Minister, stand for dignity, fairness and humanity. Retain the 5-year route to settlement, end retrospective changes, protect refugees and BNO families. Reform skilled worker visas so they prevent exploitation rather than enable it. And above all, recognise the simple truth that those who care for Britain are part of Britain.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Sir Edward. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. Last week, I held a meeting in my constituency of Dewsbury and Batley with the Nigerian community. There were around 30 workers present, many of whom work intolerably long hours performing vital tasks for scandalously low pay in the healthcare and social care sectors. These people were scared. They were scared the state was going to arbitrarily deprive them of their ability to live with security and to plan with any certainty for the future. One of these individuals, her name is Uzuamaka, wrote to me outlining her concerns. Uzuamaka came to our country in 2022 and works in the NHS. She wrote, and I quote, that I am an immigrant, a taxpayer, a worker and a human being. But the new immigration white paper strips me and others like me of dignity, stability and belonging. End quote. Proposals to extend indefinite leave to remain, she quotes, to make someone live in limbo for 10 years despite working hard and paying taxes is cruelty in slow motion. 10 years of exclusion from a future. This is not about integration, it is about humiliation. How can a Labour administration that professes to care about social justice participate in such performative barbarity against immigrants, a group already vilified in the media and subject to acute marginalisation in the wider society? As Uzuamaka writes, This entire system treats immigration as immigrants as disposable tools. We are good enough to pay into the NHS, but not to benefit from it. We are needed, but never welcomed. Similarly, proposals that workers could still qualify after 5 years if they earn over £50,000 are, and I quote, a gatekeeping tool. Most healthcare assistants, carers, cleaners and laboratory technicians will never meet this bar. Yet we clap for them, we depend on them, we call them key workers, now we discard them.
Would
End
my
quote.
friend give way?
I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. And on that last point he was making, last week over 45 migrant rights groups described the earned settlement proposals as fundamentally racist and classist. So does the honourable member share my deep concerns that these proposals will absolutely hit the most vulnerable the hardest and create a discriminatory two-tier system in which wealth and certain jobs or nationalities are prioritised over others?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and I wholeheartedly agree with her comment. We have to have equal compassion for all in our society, whether they were born here or whether they came here to build a life for themselves and support our country in the prosperity that we all share in. So I completely agree. Uzuamaka concluded her letter by asserting that we do not want favours, we want fairness, we do not seek sympathy, we demand justice. So I conclude, Sir Edward, with the following. If Labour politicians did not go into politics to give a voice to the otherwise powerless, such as Uzuamaka, and to fight for a humane state, then why are they here? That is why they must vehemently oppose any changes that would extend indefinite leave to remain or unjustly penalise those on low incomes. And I urge the Minister to strongly look at the proposals that were made by the Home Secretary. These will marginalise even further the lowest earners and the most marginalised in our society. And actually, they contribute they make a key contribution to our society, and it will destroy the fabric of our country, our NHS, the care sector, and many other industries that rely on people from outside of Britain to keep our country running. Thank you.
Gardner.
Thank you. I congratulate my honourable friend from Folkestone Hythe on securing the debate. Legislation should be clear, and the people to whom it applies should know where they stand. Retrospectivity and arbitrary or subjective criteria make for bad law precisely because they destroy that clarity and certainty. Many of my constituents in Brent West are deeply concerned by the government's consultation. I welcome the government saying that they will not change the status of those who have already settled status here. To have done so, they admit, would have been unfair. I quote, "These are people," they say, "who have been in our country for years, even decades. They have families here. They have contributed to our society. Fairness is the most fundamental of British values. We made these people a promise, and we do not break our promises." But we do break our deals, it would seem. Take the family in my constituency who came lawfully to the UK 16 years ago. They didn't meet the requirements for other settlement routes, but after 10 years, they've put down roots. They've had 2 children and were earning just enough to apply for the 10-year path to settlement under the long residency rule. So far, they've paid an FLR application fee of £1,321 per person, plus an immigration health surcharge of £2,587.50 per adult, reduced to £1,940 for their children. That's a total of £14,363, paid not once, but twice, because the fee is due every 30 months. So next year, when the 3rd payment is due, can the Minister tell me whether after already scrimping to save the £28,726, they should double down and pay the 3rd instalment of £14,363, so they can then go on to make the final ILR fee payment of £12,126? Or will their pathway suddenly find that it has been blocked by a new requirement that one of them can't fulfil, and that the £43,089 they've already spent is lost, or perhaps extended, so that they can continue to pay for another 5 years under what looks like indentured service. These people too have been in our country for years, even decades. They too have families here. They too have contributed to our society. We held out a promise to them too. It was a promise of a 10-year pathway. It now looks more like a road to nowhere, except penury.
Ayub Khan.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to serve on your chairmanship. As someone who represents the constituency proud of its diversity, I see firsthand how welcoming talented, hard-working people from around the world enrich our society. That is why the government's proposed changes to indefinite leave to remain hit so close to home and threaten to upend the lives of so many in my area. Few in this chamber will truly understand the insecurity that comes with moving to another country, of building a life while your future, your family plans, and your financial stability rest on political decisions beyond your control. It is therefore no surprise that so many people who contribute enormously to our communities and economy feel frustrated and distressed as the goalposts are moved yet again. These changes are not only unfair. I'll give way.
Oh, I thank my honourable friend for giving way, because talking about distress, one of my constituents is incredibly distressed. They're a dependent of a local business owner and they contacted me about the ECAA route. They're concerned that proposed earned settlement skilled worker metrics can't be applied to ECAA entrepreneurs who must demonstrate a genuine business rather than meet salary thresholds. So does my honourable friend agree with me that any changes to indefinite leave to remain must properly consider those on the ECAA and any other specific routes?
I totally agree with my honourable member. These changes are simply unfair. But they're not just unfair, they are economically short-sighted and risk driving away the very people our country depends on. Highly skilled professionals make up a small group, fewer than 70 specialist occupations, yet they are critical to productivity, innovation and competitiveness. Employers already struggle to recruit domestically, particularly in STEM. Raising the salary threshold to 50,000 ignores labour market reality and places further strain on businesses already paying visa fees, skill charges and the immigration health surcharge. I noted the honourable member made mention of how much people pay, but there's an added cost, legal fees, which can run thousands of pounds. So these workers are not burden on the state. They pay tax, national insurance and over £1,000 per adult each year through the health surcharge. Many have partners who are also highly skilled and work full-time, yet their contribution is simply overlooked. Most concerning of all is the proposal to extend the settlement route from 5 years to 10, potentially applied retrospectively. People came here in good faith. Doctors, carers, engineers and teachers recruited during shortages on a clear promise of settlement after 5 years. Changing that promise and the years later breaks that trust and undermines confidence in an already punitive system. If the government truly wants a controlled and effective system, it must value contribution over political expediency. So I simply urge ministers to rethink this proposal, protecting existing routes and ensure the UK remains a country that keeps its word. Thank you.
Abtisar Mohammed.
Thank you, and I want to congratulate my honourable friend for his expert advocacy on this particular issue. As a former lawyer who worked in immigration before being elected to this House, I can say with confidence that the changes announced last year and is expected to emerge through the consultation represent some of the most complex and far-reaching reforms we have seen in decades. We've been told that this is a moral mission about restoring order and control, creating a system that is fair and firm. But if that is the aim, why are we proposing changes that strip away certainty for people who are already here? People who believe that ILR, indefinite leave, was a transitional route to stability and not a moving target.
Supposed to give way?
I will quickly.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. So many families in Reading, such as my own parents, decided to accept their places in the UK, their positions in the UK, and bring their children over on the promise of a stable educational future. We know how transformational education can be for those children to contribute to the economy in future. Does she agree that we must ensure that stability for those who are already here?
I thank my honourable friend for her contribution and agree entirely. There are many people who uprooted their lives, accepted jobs, bought homes and enrolled children in schools and planned their futures in good faith on the understanding that settlement after 5 years was the agreed pathway. Instead, they are now being told that the rules have changed midway through that journey. Retrospective application of this policy would not only be deeply unfair, it would be entirely unjustified. At the same time, the uncoupling of joint routes to settlement would leave families separated for longer periods. Consider a family where the primary breadwinner may be fast-tracked to settlement, while their spouse, the primary caregiver, perhaps working part-time, is left on a longer and more precarious route. Where are the impact assessments for maternity leave, for part-time workers, for carers or people with disabilities? We cannot announce a two-dimensional approach to migration and work out the consequences later, not when this concerns some of the most life-altering decisions people will ever make. I know that these proposals are under consultation, but we must be clear about the direction of travel. They risk recreating the very conditions that defined the hostile environment, long-term uncertainty, barriers to stability, and communities living with the constant fear that the rules could change again. When my constituents hear migration described as a destabilising event, migrants framed as a burden to be managed, and see policies recycled from failures of the past, they know that this is not reform. They know it is a road to insecurity and division. I want to put on record that the congregations of St Mark's and St Mary's in my constituency have presented me too with a petition urging the government to show compassion and to urge for suitable transitional arrangements for those who are already here, building their lives and contributing to our communities in Sheffield. They, like many of my constituents, know that these proposals lack humanity. They know that they will impose extraordinary hardship on friends, neighbours and the wider community. And they know that a country that truly believes in sanctuary does not make belonging something that has to be earned again and again and again over a lifetime. I urge the Minister to end any retrospective changes and to retain the 5-year route for people already here.
Wishart.
Thank you ever so much, Of all the grotesque and grim things that's been conducted in this race to the bottom with reform conducted by the Labour and the Conservative parties, this is by far the most grim and the most grotesque. In my constituency, I've met countless families who will be on the wrong side of this. Families who don't deserve any of this, who have done everything that has been asked of them. They work, they study, their children speak with a Scottish accent. And Scotland is the only home that so many of them have ever known. They are cherished members of our community. Yet many of them still wake up every morning unsure whether the life that they are building for themselves and their family will be taken away. That is why indefinite right leave to remain matters. It's the difference between planning for the future and simply enduring the present.
Just very quickly to add, the voice of the Hong Kong BNO is in the Harpenden and Berkhamsted constituency who feel just like that. And one says, we built our lives, our careers, finances, childcare and caring responsibilities on the rules that were promised by this government, and that this limbo, this instability is a disgrace. And if the honourable member would agree with me.
Absolutely. When people are given that security, it takes away that limbo. And I don't know if many people around this room could imagine that type of uncertain status. And this is what people have to live with every single day of their life. People, because of this, people will remain in the immigration system longer. They face repeated application, fees, health charges, and often legal costs. Illness, injury or redundancy can throw everything into question, and it might even be penalised. What is most unforgivable, though, Sir Edward, is that this government has left open the possibility that these changes could apply retrospectively to people who have already started their journey towards citizenship in the UK and who are building their lives under the current rules. This is a profound betrayal of those who trusted the system and have made the UK their home. Said, well, I've got a large Sri Lankan community in my constituency of Perth. They're partly, almost exclusively responsible for keeping our social care service together. I met them a couple of weeks ago. They're telling me they're going home. They're going home just by the threat of this. They've had enough. They don't want to be treated like this anymore. And they're refusing to go along with some things like this. And I have to say, I don't blame them. But I worry, Sir Edward, where will we get the staff to replace them in a Scotland that's in the early stages of depopulation and has some of the most challenging demographics in the whole of Western Europe? They are irreplaceable. Even better than this, migrant families, even more than this, migrant families are already in survival mode, working long hours and low-wage jobs, saving for these Home Office fees and living in insecure housing. Some risk destitution simply to keep up with the cost of maintaining lawful status. These pressures leave little time or energy to contribute for these volunteer initiatives that's going to be required of them. They have grown up here and they know other home other than this. Now, I'm looking round this chamber today and I have to say it's so encouraging to see so many, I see so many Labour members here today. So I say to them, get down to the PLP this evening, put your case forward. Let's make sure that they know the voice of the Labour members of this House. And please, for goodness sake, get another one of these famous U-turns.
John McDonnell. John McDonnell.
Through you, Chair, can I address the Minister? Just read the room. Read the room. The only other times when it's been as packed as this in recent period when I've been here has been the two-child limit and on the welfare benefits. I don't want to see our government have another embarrassing U-turn like this. The reason we're here is because every one of us will have a case that, if this goes through, will be absolutely tragic. Families have settled, sold their accommodation and everything in their home, worked hard, delivered everything asked of them, and we're going to deny them and their children the right to the future that they hope for. And I just say, if this goes ahead, every one of us will report social care collapsing in our constituents. Us through COVID as well. Some of them sacrificed their lives as well. This is just unjust. And I think the Minister needs to recognise that, take the message back to those who are developing our strategy as a government, say this isn't the route to go down. Can I just say this one final point? I'd rather not, because other people need to come in. Let me just make this point about parliamentary process. If this isn't to be done through primary legislation, where we can have a debate and amend the legislation, if it's to be done via a statutory instrument, it needs to be the double affirmative process, so that we can have a debate and offer the opportunity of amendments. Because otherwise, I think the government's going to run into a scale of opposition that's seen on other issues, frighten people, undermine our support completely unnecessarily. If there's issues around immigration we have to deal with, and we did it through the colleges, if people can remember when there were bogus colleges, we did it through proper legal process and prosecution. If there's abuses in this system, let's address the abuses. But don't harm people in this way as a result of that.
Charlie Maynard.
Thank you, Sir, for your chairmanship, and I thank the honourable member for bringing this important debate. I met with a constituent this morning, Petra, who has been in the country for 3.5 years. She works in the care sector. She works extremely long hours, which are not in her control. Sometimes she is loaded with hours 6 days straight from 7 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. Sometimes she gets no work at all. When she talks to her employer, they say, well, you know, you and the rest of your team, you are on visas, and if you report us and we go out of business, then you're all going to be leaving the UK. And this is just this enormous class of indentured servitude that we are creating.
On that point, will you give me very briefly?
Certainly.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Giving way. Those were the words exactly of my constituent Arshad Khan this weekend when he came to see me at my constituency surgery, that indentured servitude point that we've made about visa licences and how these people actually operate. And there's been many points made here, so I just wanted to add strength really to his argument that this is a serious point about people living with the power of their employers over their head and being held sometimes on poor rates of pay, on poor shift patterns, and they can't challenge it because their employer has all the power in the relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. This is obviously cruel, and this moving of the goalposts makes it miles crueler. And to your point, sir, about reading the room, I really hope that the Minister is reading this room, because I think the country is up in arms about this, and we should not allow this to go through. And I really ask the Minister to reconsider.
Mark Stewards.
Thank you, Sir Edward. It's a pleasure to serve in your chairship today. I want to start by saying that controlling our borders is a basic function of the state. The government inherited open borders and is now undertaking the serious work required to fix them. And I do welcome the Minister's efforts, but I do think there are some tweaks we can make. I've spoken on this issue several times before, particularly about the BNO Hong Kong visa holders, and I'm grateful that the government has committed to keeping the 5-year route for those affected. Today, though, I'm going to focus on how these proposed changes will affect families, especially those I've been speaking with in the Morley Indian community. Now, around 30% of the families I've spoken with are due to receive their ILR within the next 6 months, so they are understandably very anxious about what these changes mean for them. The vast majority are high earners or work in key sectors. Many of the families I spoke to, many of the people I spoke to, earn well over £50,000. They don't claim benefits, and they contribute significantly to our economy and to our public services through their taxes. Now, it's because at least one member of these families is earning a high salary that their spouses and partners have been able to move into part-time work, often so that they can help raise the children and care for them. Now, as a result of this situation and the proposed changes, that they are now very worried they will not meet the new criteria at the same time as their partners. They came to this country under one set of rules, which allowed dependents to move to the UK with them, and now they are very concerned at the prospect of being unable to qualify together and being broken up entirely. So my first question to the Minister is, has the government considered putting in place strong transitional arrangements that do not punish families who are already here, contributing far more to the UK than they take out? Or would the government consider that where a family, not an individual, meets the salary threshold, they can qualify for ILR together? And just one more point with the extremely limited time available to me. Many of the Morley Indian families I spoke with came over here knowing that while they were waiting for ILR, they'd pay international university fees, and they accepted that those were the rules. However, under these changes, they now might be waiting a lot longer, but worse still, they're going to find that if they do go back to India, they're no longer considered home students for the fees purposes there. So they find themselves trapped in a situation where they can't pay the fees here and they can't pay the fees back at home. I would ask, very briefly.
I thank my honourable friend for the speech he's making. Does he agree with me that while the government seeks that these proposals increase integration, that actually we risk, by limiting ILR beyond 10 years, we're actually going to reduce integration in the type of instances that he outlines, and that risks undermining the integration that I see in workplaces, churches and community groups in Sunderland that I represent.
Thank him for his point. I completely understand where he's coming from, and the people that I was speaking about in my point just before he made his intervention, they're going to find themselves trapped and effectively shut out from university education altogether, even though that they are already integrated into this country. So, Sir Edward, I just urge the government to consider the full impact of the implementation of these changes for people who are already here, already working, already contributing more than they ever take out, who came in good faith, and who have followed every rule we have set for them.
Look at Adam.
Thank you. It's a real honour to say about this debate, and hence it's very difficult for me to know where to begin, but I will do by thanking the petitioners, and also for this MP at least, and indeed many that I can see in this room, and cabinet ministers and shadow cabinet ministers, and even a prime minister. I am what I am because of when I came to this country in the manner this country treated me. I have two parents who couldn't speak a word of English, yet the support that we received means that now we have a dynasty of academics, entrepreneurs, professionals, and even a parliamentarian. I know that might be enough for a policy for people to make sure that never happens again. But we have a sense of belonging to this land, even though we are far away from our ancestral land. This does not happen by chance. It happens by design and can only happen in a country that promotes integration based on values of decency, respect, and contribution, rather than contempt, impatient, and transactional values. It works when a society respects values that should be woven into its fabric. When we value our care workers, our frontline health workers, our teachers, our transport workers, not because of how much money they earn, not because of their salaries, but because they are a foundation of our societies.
Very briefly, the point he makes, a lot of people who've come here have been branded the Boris wave. But one of my Nigerian constituents told me that they came here under the COVID wave to care for people in this country.
I agree with the gentleman, thank you. This policy also flies in the face of the Prime Minister's pre-election pledge. It is a betrayal of his sixth pledge, an immigration system, we were told, rooted in compassion and dignity. This is a betrayal felt, for me, and I'm sure for many, most sharply when it is an Asian Home Secretary, someone whose own journey reflects migration promise, now advances policies that punishes people just like her family and mine once were. And apart from being morally bankrupt, it also flies in the face of fiscal responsibility. We are told this is all about cost, that migration is a burden, yet even those claims collapse under scrutiny. The widely cited £234 billion ILR emergency figure has been discredited even by its own authors. Correct the errors and migration delivers a net fiscal gain of £100 billion. Sorry, in the interest of time. Security results in integration. Insecurity results in chaos, and not to mention serious possibility of exploitation by employers, the indentured labourer point that has been made by my colleagues before. So when did modern Britain become such a transactional country? If we truly want an integrated Britain, the last thing we want is longer waiting times, uncertainty, and a broken promise. What we need is certainty, 5 years maximum with fast decisions, and a real acknowledgement that migration, when done with respect and fairness, strengthens a country, not weakens it.
Melanie on.
Thank you very much, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. Proposed changes to ILR and the consultation on earned settlement have far-reaching consequences. It is essential that they are delivered with fairness and compassion. I do support the government's mission to restore control and confidence in the immigration system, including the clear objective of reducing net migration and ensuring the rules are properly enforced.
Hear, hear.
Public trust depends on a system that is coherent, that is consistent, and that works. But I do think that it's worth remembering that the people who have come to the UK, they've come through legitimate means. They've come to fill the Brexit work gap, to support our public services and to contribute well to our society. And I have to reflect the real anxiety that I'm hearing in Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes from people who are already here, already working, already paying tax, and who entered the system in good faith under the existing framework. They've built their lives around their rules, these rules, our rules, and it'd be wrong if the goalposts were moved halfway through the match. I want to add the voice of one constituent, Victor Olabumoya, a care worker who described living under what he called visa fear. He told me that he went to work every day fearful that a single mistake could cost him not just his job but his immigration status, and that managers repeatedly reminded him that his visa depended upon them, as we've heard from others today. And in Victor's own words, he says, "You cannot give what you do not have. People who are treated without dignity struggle to give dignity." And that testimony matters because it goes to the heart of what fairness looks like in practice. If we want a system that commands confidence, we must not create incentives for silence or exploitation and instability in our essential services. I think change for future arrivals probably can be just about explained, but retrospective change for those who are already here, often working in our essential public services, really risks undermining workforce stability and basic fairness. And my constituency, the issue of immigration is a topic of interest, to say the least. There's no point in pretending it's not.
Absolutely.
But it really isn't about those who've come on a proper visa, through a proper scheme. The concerns about employer from the government, the concerns about employer over-reliance on overseas labour is not the fault of these individuals. They're here because we asked them to come and help. So as this consultation progresses, I'm asking for careful consideration of transitional protections or differentiated arrangements for existing workers, so their contribution is properly recognised, their integration is supported, and their concerns are reflected in the final policy.
Hear, hear. Mike Martin.
Oh, I stumbled a lot.
Your chairship, Sir Edwards. On Saturday, I met with 200 members of the Paddock Wood Hong Kong community. Now, Sir Edwards, you're probably wondering why 200 people would give up their early Saturday evenings to see me. But they were worried, and they were worried for themselves and for their families. They came to voice a fear that their pathway for settlement had narrowed. They came because the conditions under which they uprooted their lives in Hong Kong and came to Britain were being changed. And Chair, I was deeply disappointed because they came on a promise made by the British government, and that is a promise that is potentially now being rewritten. Yeah. Let's go into some detail. I'm grateful that the Hong Kong BNO route is going to continue to allow settlement within 5 years. But there have been two changes, and one of them is about language and one of them is about earnings thresholds. So on language, many of the BNO families came as 3 generational units. And in a 3 generational unit, you're of course going to have people who are quite elderly. And so for those people, quite obviously, to achieve a much higher standard of English proficiency is much more difficult. Honourable members who've ever learnt a language in their lives will know that it's much easier when you're 20 than when you are 80. So what are we to do? If you're 80 and you fail a higher language requirement, will you get sent back to Hong Kong when the rest of your family remains? We need more detail. The government needs to look at this in more detail. And to the income requirements, well, as I said, we had these 3 generational family units coming, and often, 70% of BNO visa holders are degree educated, and they are working often in jobs that's significantly below their professional level and standing. But I won't take any interventions because there are so many people seeking to get in. But what this means, this combination of high-skilled individuals, yet 3 generational families, is that, quite rightly, not everyone in that family is going to work. So what about the carers, the part-time workers, the elderly, the students? If one studies at university and you are not earning, do you need to meet the income threshold? There is a complete lack of clarity. When I attended the Chinese New Year celebrations last year in Paddock Wood, and these were held jointly with the congregation of St Andrew's Church in Paddock Wood, I saw firsthand just how deeply that community enriches our community and how that was reciprocated from the native Paddock Wood community. And so I just urge the Minister, in conclusion, the British government has made a promise. The British government should stick to its promises, and I urge them to reconsider.
Hold on. Brian Leishman.
Good afternoon, Sir Edwards. St Mark's Gospel says, "Thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself."
With the political discourse of today largely focusing on blaming immigration for the societal ills our country faces, that commandment is sadly not in fashion. The government's proposal for pathways to settlement introduces a new 10-year baseline for people, including those granted refugee status, with time added or taken away for circumstances seen as favourable or unfavourable to the Home Secretary of the day. If someone was to arrive by illegal routes, then this adds 20 years to this baseline, meaning 30 years before they could apply for citizenship. Bear in mind that arriving by an irregular route is almost unavoidable due to the virtual non-existence of safe and legal routes. It really must be acknowledged that claiming asylum is a human right. Claiming asylum is not an abuse of any system. And proposals that differentiate between regular and irregular arrivals are unequal at their very core. Differentiating would create an inferior class of people whose protection needs might well be internationally recognised, but their long-term status is being kept deliberately precarious. In a Scottish context, the Scottish Refugee Council have said that in Glasgow last year there were over 2,000 children from refugee families in temporary accommodation. Scottish local authorities are already at breaking point with over a decade of underfunding, over £1 billion these last 10 years from the SNP Scottish Government. And we all know that children growing up in poverty has a huge long-term impact on life chances, health outcomes, our local and national economies, and on the condition and functionality of our public services. So, I say to the Minister, Labour must do better than copying the right-wing parties and demonising immigrants and asylum seekers. This country doesn't need us or want us to be some diluted version of reform. Whether we are talking about immigration, welfare, education, the environment, industry, or all the rest of it, ultimately, the question is always the same. What kind of society do we want to live in? One that looks after the most disadvantaged, vulnerable and destitute, or looks to scapegoat and point the finger at these people for the political decisions that have led to growing poverty and inequality. As a socialist and as someone that believes in the commandment of love thy neighbour, then I know what I want my government to do.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Ian Solemn.
Thank you, Sir Edward. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair this afternoon, and I'm grateful to the petitioners for bringing this important matter to Parliament and to the Honourable Member for Folkestone and Hythe for leading the debate off. The government is right to say that settlement should be earned through contribution. I think few would dispute that principle. The consultation documents point to a system that contradicts those stated goals on this. I'm sure the Minister will say that today that no final decisions have been made, but the direction of travel is clear. A 10-year baseline for most routes, 15 years for care workers, as many members have mentioned today, with complex reductions based largely on salary. That fundamentally misunderstands what settlement is for. The key I will give way.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. He makes a very good point about salaries and that income levels are not necessarily a good predictor of usefulness to society and economic contribution. We've heard that very clearly about social workers, but does he agree with me that in high-tech sectors such as space, biotech, robotics, etc., we need global talent, and only by pooling those talents will we succeed, and that's why we should not be putting these barriers to indefinite leave to remain in place?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and indeed I will cite an example of that from my own constituency shortly. I think the key distinction to make is between selection and settlement. Our visa system is the selection mechanism. We judge whether someone has the skills we need, meets thresholds, fills a genuine vacancy. Settlement is about whether people can actually plan a future here and commit to staying. 5 years of working, paying taxes, learning English, staying out of trouble, that is earning it. Extending to 10 or 15 years doesn't raise standards. It just makes Britain unattractive to exactly the people our visa system says that we should be welcoming. Let me give a concrete example. I have a constituent who came in on the high potential individual visa, a route explicitly designed to attract the world's best talent. He's a skilled engineer. He chose the UK based on the clear 5-year pathway. He tells me, had a 10-year route been the policy, he would never have come. That's the reality when we're competing for talent. Now, the government also claims the changes will improve integration, but uncertainty is the enemy of integration. Someone who knows they can settle after 5 years will invest fully in their future here. Someone facing 10 to 15 years of uncertainty keeps their options open elsewhere. Another constituent who's been in touch is an orthopaedic surgeon, a professional serving our NHS. He has 3 children in British schools. He tells me that if these rules change, he cannot wait for another 6 years. He will leave, and our NHS and our country will lose him and his talent. The moral stakes are clearest when I hear from Hong Kongers in my constituency.
Martin Rhodes.
Thank you, Ms Lewell. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairing. We have a health and social care system built on the commitment and skills of workers who are too often underpaid, overstretched and undervalued. Yet they contribute not only to the well-being of our society, but to the strength of our economy. In December, I met with one of those care sector workers, who is also a Unison representative in my constituency of Glasgow North. And we discussed their campaign for fairer visa rules for migrant care workers in the UK. For transparency, I would put on record my membership of Unison. Many of those working in social care are migrants who care for some of the most vulnerable and elderly in our society. If settlement is to be earned through contribution to the UK economy and society...
I'm grateful for giving me one of the 4 pillars that he has set out in the consultation document in relation to integration is about volunteering. And it's been mentioned by a number of honourable members this afternoon that there is an arbitrariness to this, a subjective nature to the issue of volunteering. Who is going to certify the volunteer work that's been done? One can imagine a plethora of organisations being set up who will happily then be able to sign a chit that says so-and-so has volunteered for so many hours a week. How is this whole process actually going to operate? Because it seems arbitrary and subjective. What will the volunteering actually entail, and how will it have to be for the home community, or will it have to be for the community, the wider community?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for his very good point there. And this is something we in the Home Office have discussed in detail many, many times, and this is why it's at consultation. It is subjective, it is complex, and right now, stood here, I can't give you a definitive answer, but we will reach that and announce that in due course. Yes, I give way.
Minister, I must disagree with much of what you've said. Most immigrants in our country are not benefits grandiers, are not criminals. In fact, most of those that I've met in my constituency surgery are hard-working people. So I ask you, just last week I had a woman and her husband and her children at my constituency surgery in tears because of the proposed policies that your government has put forward. And they tell me that both of them work full-time, and when one is working, the other one is caring. They pay into our tax system, they work most weekends, and yet they still struggle with their rent, with their food. So I ask, what point will they volunteer?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for his question. You're right, most migrants are not criminals. Most migrants are thoroughly decent people, and that's recognised by this government and, of course, by the Home Office. On the volunteering side of things, this is still a consultation, and we will set out more detail in due course. It pays me to not give more detail now, but that's where we're at.
On that issue, we can agree.
Yes, I give way.
Ali Stodds.
Very grateful, Minister, for giving way. I wonder if you could also just clarify on a previous point, also perhaps potentially a confusion. Can you just clarify that it is most definitely not the case that all migrants go into social housing? In fact, it's pretty much the opposite a lot of the time, and in fact all of those who have contacted me about this are not living in social housing. Not that anyone should have any shame about living in social housing in the first place. And just secondly, he talked about firm elements of the government's proposals. Were they the ones about exemptions that he mentioned before, or are there other firm elements?
Social housing, it's the increase of 2.2 million that would have access to that with the already 1.34 million waiting list, and our ambition to build just 1.5 million. What we are firm on at this point... yes,
Tony Vaughan.
I'm grateful to the Minister. But does it also not... Does the Minister actually have evidence about how many people you think are going to switch from being, not claiming benefits to claiming benefits, or from not being in social housing to in social housing? Or is this actually just a political judgment that's being made?
Refer to you, the convention's the same as in the main chamber.
I apologise.
You're referring to myself.
I apologise.
Minister.
For his point there. Look, what I'm not going to do is make up facts and figures on the spot. But it's not in my speech, so to give you an absolute fact. But what I can say is around 15% of all on universal credit are people who are not British nationals. And I think that's a reflection on the demand that it can put on our welfare system and, of course, on housing. I'm going to make some progress at this point. UK to take up a job, make an important contribution to our economy and our public services, filling essential skills and labour market gaps. But for too long, sectors have become reliant on them to fill those gaps and have not invested enough in our domestic workforce. The reforms we've set out in the Immigration White Paper last year are addressing that balance. We're reversing the long-term trend of an over-reliance on recruitment from abroad, who are instead increasing investment, we are instead increasing investment in skills and training for those in the UK. We implemented the first of those reforms in July last year, raising the skills threshold back to RQF 6, or roughly degree-level occupations, leaving a short list of medium-skilled occupations deemed critical to our industrial strategy and critical infrastructure. This restored the purpose of the skilled worker route and meant a reduction of more than 100 occupations. In December, we then raised the immigration skills charge by 32%. We are presently considering the Migration Advisory Committee's review of salary requirements before making further changes, and their upcoming review of the medium-skilled temporary shortage list in the summer. I will take an intervention.
Bishop Ferguson.
I'm grateful to the Minister for taking an intervention. Given that we reckon that there's some 30% of posts in the NHS and the care sector are taken up by people who have come from overseas, at what point will his reforms, those reforms that he's referring to just now, get us to the point where we can do without those 30% of people who are currently working in the health service? It strikes me that before we do anything along these lines, he needs to do an awful lot of work with the health department to make sure that balance can be had.
Thank my honourable friend for her point well made, and I can assure you that work is going on. I will come to that shortly in my response. I just want to address some of the questions that members have raised at this point. One of them is on an impact assessment. It's important that that is produced and made public, and that will come once the consultation is ended and once we've made all the final decisions. It's really important that we are matching the migration market with the skills market and, of course, the jobs market. And we are working hard in the Home Office across department to ensure that we're attracting the right workers to fill the jobs that we need to work. But I'll turn now to care workers. This government is immensely grateful to those who come to the UK with good intentions and continue to play a vital role in the adult social care sector. However, it is clear that international recruitment went too far and the route admitted unprecedented numbers of migrants and their families. As the Right Honourable Member for Brent North West, made point made well earlier, there was around 600,000 migrants coming to the country to fill just 40,000 roles in this sector.
Does he share with me a certain sense of irony that the former Home Secretary and the former Immigration Minister, who were responsible for giving those 616,000 visas out, have now joined Reform.
Right honourable friend for his point, very well made, and this place never ceases to amaze me. That's politics, I think. Some have raised during the debate the Unison's campaign around sector-wide visas. There is a commitment within the Immigration White Paper looking at how we make it easier for these workers to change employer. So that is being looked at seriously within the consultation. However, we do want to, of course, retain that ability to punish those dodgy employers who are dishing out